Thank you. As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia who listens to constituents, I know life is getting worse for you and this government doesn't care. Australia has entered a per capita recession. The total GDP is still going up on paper. Technically, the government can say that we aren't in a technical recession. Yet, on average, the gross domestic product per Australian went backwards. That's a per capita recession. You're not imagining it. Life is getting far, far worse on average for the entire country. This isn't news to anyone who's recently paid a grocery docket or a power bill or tuned in to hear Philip Lowe whether or not the Reserve Bank are going to make their lives even harder this month. It's news to the Albanese government, though, because they're more interested in telling everyone to vote for the Voice than doing something to fix the cost of living. The Australian Bureau of Statistics has confirmed what we already knew. On average, life is only getting tougher, far tougher for Australians. The major cause of Australia's per capita recession is the UN 2050 net zero policies that are putting a chokehold on our country. This fact is one of many that exposes the lie that wind and solar are the cheapest source of electricity. With more wind, solar and batteries on the grid than ever in history, power prices have never been higher. This is mirrored around the world in countries adopting solar and wind. The record-expensive power bills bite more than once, not only when Australians hand over more money than ever to their electricity and gas company. Power prices feed into nearly every level, every part of our lives. Without cheap power, manufacturers can't produce the products we want and need at a reasonable price. Farmers can't afford to pump the water that irrigates crops and keeps cattle alive. Shops can't afford to keep the lights on and the doors open. So you don't just pay the price of the climate net zero pipe dream once on your power bill, you pay it for again and again and again in every other bill as well. It's irrefutable. Life is getting worse for Australians and you're all having to make tougher and tougher choices around the dinner table. There's never been more proof that Australians can't afford the UN 2050 net zero pipe dream. This is leading to huge cracks in our economy. Everyday businesses are becoming insolvent. The trend for retail spending, usually a good indicator of whether households are feeling the pinch, is negative. The average cost of housing as a portion of disposable income is at 20.1%, up from almost 16.5% only a few years ago. The lowest fifth of earners who hold a mortgage are spending an average nearly two-thirds of their disposable income on the loan. Two-thirds of their disposable income on a house loan. All this means that in real terms our economy is getting worse for Australians, yet that isn't showing up yet in the total GDP, which records the amount of activity in the economy. This is where the government is using their favourite Ponzi scheme, mass immigration, to cover up the cracks. Listen carefully. When you let more immigrants into the country, they have to spend money on the same things we all have to, like food, housing, transport, energy. All of this spending counts towards total gross domestic product. If the total gross domestic product goes down, we enter a recession, which is an embarrassing look for the government. So it's a pretty simple equation for the Albanese government. More immigrants equals more spending, which equals the total gross domestic product going up. And the government can say we're not in an official recession. That's why they're doing it. And bugger the cost to individuals. At the same time, life continues to get worse for Australians. Smaller amounts of gross domestic product growth and our limited housing and services have to be shared with hundreds of thousands of new immigrants. That's the per capita recession. With more people, demand increases and prices increase even more. The Albanese government expects to increase our net immigration to 715,000 people over 2 years. That's the size of the entire Gold Coast, Tweed Heads area, or 1.5 Canberras arriving in just 2 years. Every arrival will need a bed. Every arrival will need a roof over their head. Where does the Albanese government expect them to live? To which one of our overfilled schools will children go? To which overflowing hospital will they go when they get sick? The Albanese government doesn't care about the answer to these questions as long as they can say, we're not in a technical recession. Bugger the cost to people, their lives. The solutions to the cost of living crisis are clear. They'll just take some guts and some honesty, abandon unaffordable climate, UN 2050 net zero pipe dreams, and cut net immigration to zero until our essential services and housing catch up.